Welcome to Raise the Anchor with host Melissa Burbridge. In this podcast, I will share the stories of individuals who have made major life-changing decisions. The purpose of this podcast is to tell their stories and inspire change within. Stick around and share their journey with me. On today's podcast, we have the head event planner for the Social Media Examiner. We have Phil Mershon. Welcome to the podcast.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So excited to have you. Been to a couple of your events and I loved them. You're kind of an idol of mine. You put on these big worldwide events and we'll share that with our audience shortly. So before you did that, the social media conferences, what did you do?
So I've had a diverse career. I've been a computer programmer. I worked for a couple different nonprofits traveling around the world speaking. I worked for a large multinational company as a corporate trainer. I've been a pastor, a musician, and a worship leader. And then I've been doing events for the last decade.
So tell us a little bit about the pastor. What made you leave being a pastor?
I don't know that anything made me leave it. It was more of a financial circumstance when the Great Recession hit in 2007 to 8. I was in San Diego, and by the end of 2009, I didn't have that job or the partner job that I had with it. And so we had to go looking for what's next. And after almost a year of looking for another pastoral job, I realized that all the opportunities that were coming to me were more in the freelance space. And I started freelancing for Social Media Examiner in 2010. And by the end of that year, it had become like a half-time contract. And by 2012, it had become full-time. And I continued to be a part-time worship pastor for 6 years. And that ended at the end of 2016. And by then, I was very full-time with Social Media Examiner and decided not to pursue another part-time. But once a pastor, always a pastor. So I still do things. I have a podcast. I have a blog. I do things in that realm.
Nice. Well, we'll definitely leave those links in the podcast description so people can follow along. That's so interesting. So before we deep dive into the Social Media Examiner in that world, what is an interesting other talent that you have?
Well, I mentioned I'm a musician, so I'm a jazz saxophonist. I'm a songwriter, so that's something that always shows up in whatever I do, and I think you witnessed that at one of our events this summer.
Yeah, that's why I wanted to bring it up, because you're such a good saxophone player. I think that was my favorite part of the networking parties that we did during that week of the conference. It was just so fun. The dance parties, you guys were such a hoot. I wish we could do that almost every week, but I know it's like such a big production.
That would be fun.
It would be fun. It would be like a party every week. Here's a sample of how well he plays the saxophone. So fantastic, Phil. I could listen to that all day. So you work for the Social Media Examiner doing the event planning. What kind of event planning did you do before the Social Media Examiner, or did you just start with the Social Media Examiner?
So before I worked for Social Media Examiner, I never would have called myself an event planner or an event director, but I've been doing events for almost my entire career. So even back at the days at Boeing when I was a computer programmer, the part of my job I loved was when we were planning events. When I worked for the nonprofit, when I worked for several different churches, I've organized retreats. I've organized week-long seminars. I've rewritten training programs. When I was a corporate trainer, I created programs that got noticed as, best event ever, in which I think the bar was pretty low in corporate America, but still, it was like, that was pretty awesome. So I've been doing it in some form or another. Like I would say, I've planned thousands of worship services, and that's an event of a certain kind. So I've been doing it really for a good part of my life, but it took on a whole new level of meaning when you start planning events for 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 people. Those are different. than the kinds of events that I was doing before, especially when you're setting up a convention center where you've got to spend six figures on all the audio visual equipment and all the moving parts. Like literally 1,000 people are needed to put on an event of that magnitude. And my job was to help orchestrate all those people to be in the right place at the right time with the right equipment. And if they didn't, figure out how we're going to solve it when something goes wrong.
That's a huge task. So tell us a little bit about Social Media Examiner for those people that don't know what that event is or what you guys do.
Yeah, we're a media company. So we have an online blog, two podcasts. We've got a large YouTube channel. We're very present on all the socials, but our job is to help social media marketers and business owners and entrepreneurs stay current on what's working in social media. So we try to do the work to help you figure out what's working today and how do you do it. Like that's what we're known for is the how-tos. So we work with, experts all over the world who write for us, who we bring on an interview, who create the videos for us so that we can teach you as the marketer, here's what's working on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever.
And the events are amazing and they're so jam-packed. Like it's worth every cent. You could probably sell it for 3 times the amount you do. It is worth every cent. I don't know how many clients I've helped just with the Instagram conference I went to this year alone. So those are huge events. And you guys have to work with some of these big names. Like how do you organize those schedules? Because they're busy, you're busy, and you have to jam it into a certain day, especially the conference on Zooms. So we'll get into the COVID later, but how do you keep track of all that?
Well, we definitely start early. You don't invite some of the well-known speakers to speak for you 2 weeks out. We reach out months in advance and have to work with everybody to line their schedules up in the time slots that we're thinking. And like the event we're doing in 2 weeks, we had to adjust the start times because we have people in different parts of the world and people with other commitments already. So we had to adjust, but everyone was able to say, yes, I can do it that week. Here are the times that I can do it. And then we look at all those schedules and say, okay, here's the ideal schedule. Let's lock it in and let's go, and sometimes they're having to speak at, like a lady I talked to yesterday is in Pakistan and she's having to do her talk at 11 o'clock at night for her, which is 11 in the morning for us. And,
oh, wow.
Sometimes it's a bit of a sacrifice, but it's, they're willing to do it because they know the audience is very valuable to them.
Yeah, those conferences are just life-changing. I can't wait until you guys have them in person again. So have you ever had an issue where you had a speaker lined up, they're like gaining traction, people want to see them, and then they cancel?
We have more so for our online events than in person. I think we have almost 100% commitment. When someone says they're going to come, the only thing that keeps them from coming to the on-site event is if they, I think maybe in 1 or 2 cases they're overseas and it just didn't make sense for them anymore because it's expensive, both from the lost business standpoint, so that it's for every business or every speaker that are making a business decision. Is this an event that I want to go to? What business am I letting go of? What business might I gain from doing this? Now, in our online events, we've had some people, and but typically we get plenty of notice. The only reasons that happen are like illness or weather-related things have prevented people. Like our conferences are usually in early spring, so sometimes people traveling from the East Coast to the West Coast might get stopped by a snowstorm or something, and we had 2 or 3 speakers this year who couldn't do it because of COVID.
Yeah.
The conference was in early March, right before everything shut down. And we did have someone who got sick and we had someone who was afraid they would get sick. And then we had someone else who was there who was sick, but they spoke anyway. That they just did their talk and hid in their hotel room the rest of the time. So.
Oh, that's interesting. So since the Social Media Examiner events are so huge and well attended, how do you continue to grow them and make them even better than the previous year?
Well, those are 2 different questions. How do you continue to grow it is a marketing question. So, we do have a large online audience. I know since the first year that we hosted the conference that there are a lot more social media oriented conferences today than there were in 2013. And so we do have competition, and every one of those conferences has a little bit different spin on how they're going to approach it. And, our vibe is not for everyone. I happen to like our vibe because I've helped create it, but it's not for everybody. And so we get that. And, and not everyone wants to go to a large conference. Some people like to go to a small conference where there's only a couple hundred people there maybe. And so those are things that people are weighing out in their minds of why do they come. But, we have the opportunity to continue to convince people why they might want to come to this conference, why it's valuable to be in person. And I think in 2021 and beyond, why you want to be in person is going to be a different conversation than it was in the last decade. And for really the history of events, I think people will be rethinking, why do I need to go in person? And what's so valuable about being there? And so we're going to have to lean into the reasons why people want to come and be in person and helping them feel safe about it, but also getting the value and then not doing the things that they could have done from home. And I think that's what people will be evaluating. The other part of the question is, how do you keep innovating and making it better? We do that every year, no matter what. Like, it's always my charge to the team. It's let's make next year's conference our best year ever. How do we make this the best event we've ever created? And so we're constantly evaluating what worked, what didn't work, what can be improved. What do we want to make sure we don't let go of because that was really good. And sometimes we tweak things that we shouldn't have because they were good and they were good just the way they were. But we are always trying to make it better in the eyes of our customer, not just in our eyes, but what did the customers tell us? What are they saying? What do they like? What do they appreciate? How do we make it resonate better with them? So there's a thorough process. We spend a month after the conference just kind of doing a deep dive into the data, looking at what people said. What did we think? What do we know broke? What do we know went really well? And then saying, okay, what can we improve? What's the top priorities? You can never improve everything. So we evaluate what are our top 5 to 10 things. If we can improve these, will it move the needle? Let's focus on those things. How are we going to implement that? Because it's a mammoth project to put on an event for 4,000 people, and it literally can take us all year long to do that well.
I imagine you have to. I'm just trying to plan a little workshop with maybe 14 people, and that takes a good 2 months to plan. So I can't even imagine how much planning goes into what you do. And you guys attract like the cream of the crop, the top end people that people want to follow. Do they come to you, or do you reach out to them because you see that they're the top people?
It's been a long process of relationship building, and it really starts with our CEO, Mike Stelzner. He has been building those relationships from the beginning, and even before Social Media Examiner existed, he had relationships, and that's been really a significant part of our success, is that we try to make other people successful, and as we make them successful, they make us successful. And so it's kind of been this mutually symbiotic relationship where we support the speakers in their growth. Because many of them do become very successful, we have to continually develop new relationships, because some of them become so successful that they don't have as much time for us. They've got their business really takes off, and they may not be able to make it some years, and that's fine. Like, we love seeing that happen, but it means that we're always out there. But I'd say we haven't had a big problem with reaching some of the well-known speakers who are in our industry. Like, if they're not in our industry, it's a whole different deal. But if they're in the social media marketing industry, they pretty much know who we are and would desire to be at the event if they were invited. So we end up having, the privileged situation of saying, who do we really need? Who's got the expertise on the topics? And still it ends up being a scheduling thing, because there are opportunities. Literally, there probably were 3 or 4 events happening during our conference this year that someone could have been at. And sometimes speakers are flying from one to the next, to the next, to the next, and they can give us a day at our conference, and we're glad to get them.
Do you wish you had an engaged YouTube following that turned into paying customers? Have felt the need to diversify beyond Facebook? What's stopping you? Perhaps you think you don't have the time, know-how, or skills to compete on YouTube. You don't need to have a big budget, big team, or an amazing personality to become a YouTube marketing rock star. Register today for the YouTube Marketing Summit and learn how to increase your reach, create amazing engagement, and ultimately sell more. To buy tickets or to find out more information, go to the link in the podcast description below in affiliation with the Social Media Examiner.
I know you attract a lot of the top end, and some of them have like the same strengths in a few different areas. Have you ever asked a speaker to speak on IG stories, and then another one who's good at IG stories talk about like IG marketing, and they really wanted to do the stories part? Like, are there any ever those kind of conflicts?
Most speakers have more than one thing they can talk about.
Yeah.
And we always ask them for 3 or 4 ideas of what they would like to talk about when we're lining up the schedule. So we can select. So that way, we might have 2 people talk about IG stories, but we want them to have 2 different angles on it. Because we're not afraid of having 2 people talk about it if it's a really popular or needed topic that we know the audience is going to resonate with. But, no one's ever had an issue because they are the ones that present the ideas in the first place. We might come back and say, would you be willing to nuance it in this direction or this direction? Because we think that's going to resonate better with our audience, or that's going to complement better what somebody else is talking about. But we don't usually have problems because it was their idea in the first place, what they wanted to talk about.
No, that's awesome. That's just a market question that we've had. I'm currently training my business partner, and she's like, I wonder if they ever have that kind of conflict of people want to talk more on this subject than that subject. But I like the fact that you make them give you 3 or 4 different ideas, and then you can choose from there so that there isn't that conflict. You run a pretty tight ship. I know that when we had that whole week online, everything was down to the second. How can you do that on such a huge capacity?
It's all about process. If you have your processes in place and your worksheets and your team, like even a 14-person event, it might not be something I would do alone. I would have somebody helping me. If I was the main talent, I'd have somebody else helping me with the details. I've got a team of people depending on what kind of event we're doing. Like the Zooms, the networking parties that you went to, I had 3 or 4 people helping me behind the scenes create those. And so we had a timeline of things that we were doing, people who were responsible for different things. And that to me is the key. You just have to delegate, know the team. Everyone knows their responsibilities. You've practiced things. Like I just found out yesterday on the Zoom calls that my assistant had probably practiced 25 times before we did that to make sure everything worked right. She just didn't want anything to fail, and was that overkill? Maybe, but it paid off because nothing failed. She was 100% competent and ready for it. And that's the kind of thing we do. We do dry runs on things. We make sure everyone knows where they're supposed to be and that they've done it before. We don't ever want to be doing something live the first time in front of an audience that we don't know how it's going to go, or at least have an idea how it's going to go before it happens.
No, that's very smart. A lot of people can learn from that because I guess most of us are doing small events. You're doing a huge event. How has COVID changed things for everything this year? You seem to be doing a lot more events this year.
I wouldn't say that we've pivoted into virtual events because we've been doing virtual events for a decade. But we definitely leaned into that because that is one of our strengths. And, we felt like our audience would resonate with it. And yes, there are a lot of other alternatives in the market, but we felt like we could dial into some specific needs that we knew our audience had, that there wasn't really a single source out there where they could go and get what we were doing. And so that's been one of our pivots. And, we had already planned on launching a course this year, which we're going to continue with doing courses in addition to whenever we're allowed to. We'll do the in-person conference again. But I think it's understanding that there are things that we can do online And it's caused us to ask a lot of questions about who's our audience, what do they really need, and how do we best serve those needs. And we maybe got comfortable with the way we were doing that before. And so it's getting us asking a lot of great questions as a business, because any business that's going to succeed and thrive has to be serving the needs of their customers. And COVID has forced us to do that in a renewed way. And I think it's actually brought us together as a company in ways that never would have happened without COVID.
Well, that's good to hear. I know the events are always so well attended. Do you find the online ones are just as well attended?
It depends on the topic. We've had online events that we've done before that were equally attended as what we're doing in person, but it really depends on the topic. So I'd say collectively over the course of the 3 events that we've done this summer, it's about the same as attending one social media marketing world. But people's reasons for going to San Diego are different than attending an online event that requires a couple hours a day of them, So I think we're happy with the numbers that are coming. I'll say that.
No, that's good. And I also know that a lot of the online stuff that I've wanted to do, it's always because of the time zone difference. You're in California, I'm in Nova Scotia. Sometimes the time difference is just a factor into why I can't attend certain things. So I'm sure that that's a factor for you guys too.
Yeah, our audience is very international. In general, we're about 58% from North America. And so the other, 42% is from all over the world. And so that does factor into some of the things that we do, including our speakers. I don't know how many. We're doing an event next week with 12 sessions, and I want to say 4 or 5 of those speakers are outside of North America. And so we have to factor that in. Like, we're doing it early or we're doing it late, depending on where they are from, on what time they're willing to get up or how long they're willing to stay up. Like one speaker is doing his talk at midnight his time. He happens to be a night owl, so that's fine. But not everybody's willing to do that.
No, that has to be hard. So who motivates you to keep going, either personal or professional?
Well, certainly I'm a religious person, so my faith is part of my motivation. But, in terms of, I assume you mean like people who are living today?
Not necessarily. I've had people say that their grandmother from the past is who motivates them to be a better person in the future.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it's a combination. So certainly my faith in Jesus is part of it. I read the Bible every day. I'm also part of a couple of different groups of men who help me to remember to be my best self in a lot of different ways. So I think a combination of those things. And I read pretty broadly. So, different authors at different times motivate me for different reasons. So.
Oh, that's cool. So do you have a dream event you would love to organize and do? Or do you just love the Examiner so much that that's the only kind of events you want to do for the rest of your event planning?
Wow, that's a great question. I don't know if I've got a dream event that I've always wanted to plan. What motivates me is less about what the event is and more about what happens at the event. So what is at the core of who Phil Mershon is I want to see people changed in significant ways where they are finding their dreams, they're finding their passion, they're making a connection with someone that opens up possibilities they didn't know were even possible. So within an event, whether it's a social media event or whether it's back in my church days or whether it's doing something else, I'm going to be organizing that event in such a way that people are having that defining moment. I like to call it that moment when time stands still, that moment when things seem to converge, where it's like, oh, this is why I'm here on earth, or here's why I came to this event. I needed to learn that one thing. I needed to meet this one person. I needed to discover this one new idea. Whatever it might be little, it might be big, but that's why I do events. So if there's a dream event, it's to be able to design it from start to stop with that as the full goal. So a social media marketing event isn't completely driven by that. But we bring the elements together where that is possible. And I like to say I create the playground or the field where that is possible for it to happen if you're on the lookout.
Well, you definitely do some of that, because I can tell you, I felt like one of the team when we were attending the event online, and you actually pushed me out of my comfort zone because you were the first person I didn't think would say yes to come onto the podcast. You're the first one I actually went out of my way to try and get onto the podcast. Before, I was just stuck in my ways of people I already know. So you're the first one I actually said, okay, I wonder if he'll say yes, but I'm pretty sure he'll say no. And here you are. You're on here with me today.
Well, good for you. Way to go stepping out of your comfort zone, and you caught me at a good time.
So what projects do you have coming up for the Examiner and for your personal self?
Yeah, well, we've got an event in a week called YouTube Marketing Summit. So it's our third summit of this year. So that's coming up. And I'm not sure when this podcast is going live, so I maybe can answer in context of that. But we have this course called Becoming Well Known that we'll be launching again later this year. And then depending on what the governor of California says, that's going to tell me a lot about the rest of this year and what 2021 looks like.
Yeah.
On a personal level, I am on a mission to write a book called, well, the title will change because the publisher will change it, I'm sure. But the working title is Unforgettable Events: How to Create Memorable Moments within your events. And so it's all about those experiences that people have that they're going to keep talking about, that are going to say, that is the moment when this happened. And so that's what the book's going to be about. There'll probably eventually be a course. We'll see where all that ends up going, but the book is under contract, and it'll come out next year sometime. It's on a long burn process, but that's a big project I'm working on.
Can't wait to read it. Look forward to that. So where can people find out more about you and your events?
Yeah, well, socialmediaexaminer.com for all of our events and products. As far as me, you can find me on all of the socials. Depends on where you look for me. I'm on Twitter at Phil_Mershon. I think it's Phil.Mershon on LinkedIn, Facebook. You can look me up. There are several Phil Mershons in the world. I'm not the one from Hollywood. I'm not the political science professor. You'll recognize me. I'm the one with the goatee and the bald head. You'll be able to find me.
Who plays good saxophone. So lastly, who inspires you? I know we asked who motivates you, but who inspires you?
So it depends on what realm that you're talking about. So I think as a writer, Michael Hyatt definitely inspires me as somebody who's writing and doing it in a way that's impacting people's lives in a very practical way. As a musician, there's a guy named Kirk Whalum, who is a great saxophonist who happens to also be, I think, the son of a pastor. And so he brings in his spiritual background into his music, but he's a great musician. So those are two people. I have lots of people that inspire me, but those are two.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on today, and thank you for sharing your time with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Raise the Anchor. And subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss the next episode. Don't forget to rate this episode as well. I'm Melissa Burbridge, wishing you smooth sailing.